No headlines, you know why you're here. Sasha Banks and Naomi walked out on WWE Raw last night. Multiple sources, including PW Insider, Fightful Select, and, unbelievably, WWE have given us quite a lot of detail about what went on behind the scenes here. So we'll paint the picture, and then we'll hear from WWE. So PW Insider say the main event for last night's Monday Night Raw changed at the last minute to Becky Lynch versus Asuka, which we saw last night, because Sasha Banks and Naomi walked out of the show. The word making the rounds backstage is that Sasha Banks took issue with some of the planned creative for the original main event. She had a meeting with Vince McMahon, and the belief among those that we heard from is that McMahon didn't choose to change the direction to the plans regardless of the meeting. Banks wouldn't back down, and her, along with Naomi, ended up leaving Raw that night. Fightful Select corroborate this story, adding that Sasha was to be involved in a six-pack challenge with Naomi, Asuka, Doudrop, and Nikki ASH. We're told that Sasha Banks had said meeting with Vince McMahon, voicing her displeasure about the situation, but wouldn't budge on her stance. Vince McMahon also unwilling to budge. Off they go. They leave the show, and WWE shoots several new segments with Adam Pearce and Becky Lynch to quickly set up the main event for what we saw. And then WWE do something really out of character.
This is bizarre. They've released a statement. They've not just released the statement on WWE.com. They're trying to put a lot of eyes on this statement. They've also posted it to their social media. It's on their Instagram, it's on their Facebook, like images of the statement, which is very, very unusual. We will go through that now. They say, when Sasha Banks and Naomi arrived at the arena this afternoon, they were informed of their participation in the main event of tonight's Monday Night Raw. During the broadcast, they walked into the WWE Head of Talent Relations John Laurinaitis' office with their suitcases in hand, placed their tag team championship belts on his desk and walked out. They claimed they weren't respected enough as tag team champions, and even though they had 8 hours to rehearse and construct their match, they claimed that they were uncomfortable in the ring with two of their opponents, even though they'd had matches with those two individuals in the past with no consequence. Monday Night Raw is a scripted live TV show whose characters are expected to perform the requirements of their contract. We regret that we were unable to deliver as advertised tonight's main event. The main event to tonight's Raw was reportedly changed after Sasha Banks and Naomi walked out of tonight's show.
Yeah, so again, out of character for them, but as I said to you upstairs just now, the weird irony of this, it's almost 20 years to the day of Steve Austin, quote, taking his ball and going home.
I don't want to end up eating my hat right here and going, this is a work, but there's some very unusual language used in this statement. First of all, them saying belts, that's very un-WWE. In a way that they didn't need to say that. They could have just said they left their championships on the table, whatever. Okay, but also the fact that they acknowledge that it's a scripted live TV show. Scripted is a word that they certainly don't like using as well. They still try to keep up the pretense that it's legit. They don't say that.
Does it strike as maybe somebody putting out a press release who's clearly very annoyed? We've all done that thing where you post on social media with the red mist descending.
Yeah, you have.
I have. I certainly have. And maybe you don't say things the way that you would want to say them. Maybe,
but this would have gone through people. This would have gone through a PR
team. Vince is writing it.
No, Vince hasn't written that.
We do the classic Raw review on a Monday. Vince writes some guff that goes straight to telly.
If there's one man that's not going to say belt, it's Vince McMahon. I'm just throwing it out there that maybe this isn't just damage limitation, which is what a lot of people are reading into it as being. I think there's something's up here. Something's up, and I'm not saying it's an outright work, but they're certainly trying to control their narrative, aren't they?
Now, a statement has come out from Twitter user AdidasHead88. Now, this was shared on Reddit and a few other places. Allegedly a friend of Naomi's, who has gone into elaborate detail about some of the things that potentially led up to what happened yesterday. So we want to emphasize that this is coming from allegedly Naomi's friend.
Yeah, I mean, people have looked into it and it seems pretty legit, but anyway, make up your own minds. This user said, you are approached in February as being put in a tag team after both being promised big feuds at WrestleMania. You bite the bullet and put everything you've got into being a tag team. It works, you get over, win the titles at WrestleMania, and become merch pushers. 5 weeks into your reign, you show up on live TV ready to work. You are told you will be in the main event and you're happy. You both are then told that one of you will be going over by pinning the other. You have questions. Why was that decision made and how it helps y'all? So that is referring to that six-pack challenge. Allegedly, one of them was going to be pinning the other.
I allegedly heard that Naomi was Sasha, yeah.
Yeah, right. You request a meeting with your boss to discuss it. Your boss takes the meeting and everything is actually going well. He understands your concerns. The meeting ends well and the match is told to be reconstructed. For some reason, producers get mad about it. Unusual, because Vince is on top and they're getting mad with something that Vince has apparently gone back on. Anyway, you then ask, with one of your members going over, what happens to your titles? You're told basically that you'll just be carrying the belts. They want to use you both to help women's champions to get more over.
So then it goes on to suggest that the creative going into Hell in a Cell would have been Bianca Belair defending the Raw women's title against Naomi, and Ronda Rousey defending against SmackDown tag title against Sasha Banks. Presumably, this is just off the top of my mind palace, presumably you'd have had a six-pack challenge to determine the top contenders on Raw with Naomi pinning Sasha, and then on SmackDown, you would have had Sasha maybe pin Naomi, so they become top contenders in their own right.
I like that creative. If they weren't tag team champions, and for so long there has been no emphasis put on those women's tag team titles. I totally get their creative frustrations. Totally.
Adidas Head 88 goes on to say, you ask for another meeting with your boss, but this time you're being called spoiled, and producer walks away screaming. He comes back and tells you both to fix your attitudes. You have a brief meeting amongst yourselves and decide to stand up for yourselves. You go to another boss and make it clear you just have concerns. You ask why we are even in the match. Why aren't other women in it? You ask why your titles have no stories for 2 months. Again, you are met with fix your attitudes. So, after one final meeting with yourselves and asking others, you make the ultimate decision as a team. It's sad how one side is trying to create an effed up narrative. Also, it's asked why were Nikki ASH and Doudrop in the match instead of starting their program tonight. It was suggested that Sasha and Naomi wanted to work with Nikki and Doudrop in the tag for the tag titles, which made sense. I kind of thought that's probably where they might have gone anyway.
Yep.
They could have had some fun with that. Naomi nor Sasha talked down about being in the ring with either one. I don't know how that got flipped. So, based on that, a little bit more from Fightful. Who say on Fightful Select, those close to the situation said that Naomi and Sasha Banks did not claim they didn't want to work with Becky Lynch or Asuka, though it was implied in WWE's statement that they didn't, and those were the two women that were referenced. Instead, they were told that Sasha Banks and Naomi were angling to work with Nikki ASH and Doudrop, as we said just there. The talent themselves hadn't heard that Sasha and Naomi considered anyone unsafe until the statement was released. In regards to the pitch, the Nikki and Doudrop versus Sasha and Naomi pay-per-view match was turned down, and there was a pitch to have them instead interfere in the Naomi versus Belair match on pay-per-view. That was also turned down. We're told that the Sasha Banks and Naomi issues largely were concerns about the direction of their tag team and the division as a whole, which is right, because for the longest of times, there has been a concern about, I think it sounds really bad, but since their inception, there's been a lack of that real, strong, clear direction for the women's tag team title.
They have totally been used to put over singles feud. And Sasha has experienced that personally. I don't believe for a second, right, that Sasha and Naomi would consider Doudrop and Nikki as unsafe. I think that's bollocks. They are well-travelled veterans, essentially. They've been doing it for a long, long time, right? I don't believe that for a second. I think that's nonsense from WWE, and I think that's damage limitation and an attempt to smear the characters of these women. But man, this is constantly developing. By the time this video comes out, we're going to probably learn a little bit more. I'm struggling to really form an opinion because some of this feels like a work. I was sort of expecting WWE to go, and also they were on the floor banging their fists. You remember they did that before,
and they fed burgers to swans.
Right. So I'm struggling with this. My immediate response was like, oh man, I think it's really unprofessional when people walk out because they don't like the creative. However nonsensical that creative may be, but it appears that there's a lot more to learn about this situation, and it totally sort of depends on who you believe here, doesn't it?
And as we learn more throughout the day, you will get it first at cultaholic.com. Our top story this morning, Sasha Banks and Naomi walk out of WWE Raw due to creative frustration and alleged disrespect. More later. Woo. Stay safe. Love you. Bye.
Happy Tuesday.